As a suspense screenwriter,
Good boy,
I'd sell
stay
this as a
focused.
pressure cooker thriller where every hallway hides a threat.
Good boy,
A
you ready to
military
go?
base cut off from the world.
All right,
A
let's
woman
move
with
out.
bruised ribs and a war
Target
dog at her
locked.
side.
Coordinates confirmed.
A traitor
Copy. Awaiting green light.
inside the
Green light.
system.
Execute now.
And a clock
Roger that.
ticking before another extraction
Take him
ends
down.
in blood.
Moving
The
to cover.
deeper Maya
Go.
digs, the clearer the truth becomes. She wasn't
Target
sent there
confirmed.
to fit in.
Move out.
She was sent there to
Good
break
boy. Track
open
the
a
scent.
conspiracy no one else could survive. The kick came out of nowhere, crashing into Maya Cole's side. The force sent her sprawling onto the ground, sharp stones digging into her hands as the air rushed out of her lungs. Above her, 4 soldiers stood laughing, as if they had just won a great battle. Master Sergeant Victor Harmon's voice dripped with contempt. "Get on your feet, you coward. Oh, that's right. Analysts cannot fight. They only push paper." But they had no idea the woman on the ground was already planning her response. If your heart is already pounding, then you have come to the right channel. Be sure to subscribe to see how Maya's story unfolds, because an unexpected turn is coming that you will not see. Tell me what city you are listening from in the comments below. I would love to know where our stories travel. Fort Cambria was a remote outpost, 40 miles from civilization, and it always smelled of fuel, cleaning oil, and old coffee. This was a place where a man's worth was measured by his strength and deployments. Rank was everything, and being a woman was a serious disadvantage. Maya Cole had been here just 11 days, a quiet and unseen presence. She was unremarkable by design, with a plain uniform and a quiet nature that made her easy to overlook. Her file described her as nothing more than an intelligence analyst on a short-term mission. Always by her side was Remy, a German shepherd whose watchful amber eyes saw everything. He could feel the tension in the air, just as Maya could sense what a person was truly thinking. She was walking to the East Storage Unit when a commanding voice stopped her in her tracks, belonging to someone unaccustomed to being disregarded. "Hey, analyst." She paused and turned slowly, with measured control. Master Sergeant Victor Harmon was a mountain of a man, his face set in a constant frown. At 42, he was a veteran of 3 combat tours overseas, and his features seemed carved from stone. He was flanked by 3 other soldiers, all of them looking eager for trouble. "This is a restricted area," Harmon announced. Maya glanced down the hall before looking directly at him. "My badge opened the gate, Sergeant. I do not care what your badge did." He took a step toward her, closing the distance. "I am making it clear you are not welcome here." Remy's body tensed, a nearly invisible shift as he prepared to move. Maya felt the subtle pull on the leash without looking down. "Easy," she whispered softly. It was unclear if the command was for her dog or for herself. One of Harmon's men, a young soldier about 24 years old, with an angular face, grinned. "Is that an actual service dog, or is it for your feelings? You look like you need a hug." The others snickered. Harmon said nothing. He just stared at Maya, evaluating her. "Why are you here?" he asked sharply. "Intelligence," she answered. "My mission is classified well beyond your pay grade, Sergeant." It was the wrong thing to say. She saw his whole body stiffen at her words. His jaw tightened, and a vein pulsed in his neck. His hands curled into hard fists. "Beyond your pay grade," Harmon echoed, the phrase dripping with resentment. "You have been here for 11 days. You have said almost nothing. You just wander around with that dog as if you are in charge." "Remy is a certified service animal," Maya said evenly. "And my orders allow me to go anywhere I need to." "Your orders," he scoffed at the idea. "Right." She knew in that instant she should have walked away. That was the smart move. But turning her back was not an option, not when she had to see what he would do with his hands. His hands were the key to everything. But the attack did not come from Harmon. It came from the soldier next to him, the young man with the angular face. He did not go for her legs, the obvious target. He aimed straight for her side, a move that told Maya he knew how to cause serious damage that could be passed off as an accident. The impact was immense. Maya fell to the ground and lay perfectly still. In a flash, Remy reacted with disciplined rage. The noise he made was not a bark. It was a low growl, promising serious consequences from a mouth that could deliver immense pressure. He lunged forward, straining the leash, but Maya, still on the floor with scraped hands and a bruised torso, kept a tight grip. "Remy, Platz," she commanded in German. The dog instantly obeyed, dropping to the ground. His eyes, however, stayed fixed on the young soldier, who took an involuntary step backward. The laughing stopped. Harmon looked down at Maya, then at her dog, and what he did next showed exactly who he was. He crouched to look her in the eye, a nasty, contorted grin spreading across his face. "Get up, you coward," he murmured. "Oh, hang on. Analysts cannot get up. They just lie there and type their useless little summaries." He got to his feet and strolled off. His men followed, one of them still laughing quietly. That was the last thing Maya heard before silence fell. She did not get up right away. She stayed on the ground, breathing slowly and deliberately. She assessed her ribs, guessing 2 were bruised but not broken. She pictured the boots she had seen. The younger man wore a size 12 with a worn-down heel. Harmon's boots were regulation 11.5, buffed to a mirror finish. Another man favored one leg, a sign of an old injury, maybe from his time in combat. She filed away every single observation. Then she stood, brushed the stones from her scraped hands, patted Remy, and walked to the storage building. The man she had come to see was already there, waiting. His name was Lieutenant Frank Dever. He was facing away, focused on his phone. The moment he heard her, his body went stiff. His reaction told Maya all she needed to know. "Lieutenant," she said. He whipped around to face her. He was in his middle 40s, thin, with jumpy eyes that never settled in one place. "How can I help you? I am here to perform an equipment check," Maya explained. She held up a tablet she was only pretending to use. "It is just routine. This will not take long. I did not get any notice about a check," Dever replied. "It is routine," she said again, giving him a warm, disarming smile. "I just have to confirm the satellite gear in here. Command wants a full accounting for the new budget. You know the drill." Dever looked from the tablet to her, and then to Remy. "What is with the dog?" "He is my partner," Maya answered. "He is cleared for all areas." A flicker of fear and worry crossed Dever's expression. He shifted slightly away from his workstation, a small, nearly imperceptible move. "Go right ahead." Maya walked over to the comms equipment on the wall, but her attention was not on the consoles. It was on the workbench. She saw a light smear on the surface where something had just been resting. She spotted fresh marks by an electrical socket. She was looking at a man who had 6 minutes alone to use a hidden phone. "Everything seems to be accounted for," she said with a smile. She made a few meaningless taps on the tablet. "Thank you for your time, Lieutenant." She walked to the door, Remy moving quietly beside her. She had gone about 40 feet down the corridor when she heard Dever making a call. She kept moving. She did not look back, but she heard what he said. Only 5 words, spoken in a panicked, low voice. "She was just in here." Maya turned a corner and leaned against the wall. She pushed gently on her sore ribs, welcoming the sharp ache. Pain had always been a tool for her, a way to stay sharp, a reminder of the mission's importance. 19 American soldiers were dead. That was the number. 19 soldiers, lost on 3 different operations in the last 8 months. Each team was ambushed before they could complete their task. 19 people who made no mistakes were gone because someone was leaking their locations. Maya's job was to find that traitor. She had been on this base for 11 days. She had been knocked down in front of a group of soldiers. She had been mocked by a man who would forget her face in 6 months. And now, following a gut feeling she had learned to trust completely, she knew that the person behind 19 deaths had just placed a frantic phone call. She pulled a small piece of folded paper from her pocket. On it were 3 names. She looked at the second name on the list. She crossed it out with a single decisive stroke. She wrote the name Devere just above it. Then she tucked the paper away, glanced down at Remy, and said quietly, "Okay, boy, we got him." Remy looked up at her, his tail giving a single, slow thump that confirmed he understood. Down the hall, Harmon's men were laughing about the woman they had knocked over. The event was quickly becoming a funny anecdote for them to tell. Each retelling added wilder, more ridiculous details, making it the perfect story to break up a boring Tuesday. They had no idea the most skilled operative on the entire installation was standing just 40 feet from them. She had scraped hands, a German shepherd at her side, and the names of 19 fallen soldiers burned into her memory. They were clueless that their small act of meanness was the best thing they could have possibly done for her mission. No one on the base knew who Maya Cole really was, and she liked it that way. She had studied Ray Solis's service file long before she met him. The details were so important that she had drawn 2 circles around his name. Her first evening at Fort Cambria, her pen making 6 sharp clicks as she absorbed the information. Chief Warrant Officer Ray Solis, age 41, was an 11-year veteran. His record showed 2 silver stars, a Purple Heart, and a quiet reprimand from 8 months ago. The document was written carefully, but it showed Solis had challenged the intelligence for Operation Coldwater. Operation Coldwater was the 3rd mission in a row to end in complete disaster. 6 American soldiers never came back from that assignment. Solis was purposefully excluded from the mission debriefing. Maya discovered him alone in the motor pool, his attention fixed on an engine as if he just needed to keep his hands busy. She used his official title, Chief Warrant Officer Solis. He looked up. His face was wide and weathered, his dark eyes sizing her up in about 2 seconds before they moved to Remy. Maya recognized a genuine and instant respect in his gaze. It was not the hollow praise people offer service animals to seem friendly. It was authentic, revealed in his relaxed stance and a slightly slower, deeper breath. "That is a handsome shepherd," he said. "His name is Remy. What happened to your hands?" She glanced at her palms, which were red and scraped. "I took a little fall." Solis watched her for a few seconds. Was it Harmon's hallway or the East Bay? The question caught her off guard. Maya kept her expression blank, but her opinion of him shifted immediately. "You heard about that. I know Harmon runs that hall like it is his private property, and I know you were over there this morning," Solis replied. He set his wrench down. News travels quickly on a small post, especially when people think a story is funny. "Do you think it is funny?" "I think it is senseless," he said bluntly. "And I also think, whoever you are not here to check on our equipment." The air between them shifted. Maya observed his hands and his posture. His entire presence was straightforward and honest. It was not a rehearsed openness, which is its own warning sign, but the natural confidence of a man who was tired of playing games. "Why would you think that?" she asked. "Because you do not move like a paper pusher," Solis answered. "And he is a working dog, not an emotional support animal. I can tell by the way he carries himself." He picked up the wrench again, turning it over in his hand. "So, you can tell me what you are doing here, or we can just call this a pleasant chat and go our separate ways." Maya studied him for a full 3 seconds, longer than she usually needed to assess someone. "Coldwater," she stated. The wrench stopped moving in his grip. "What about it?" he asked. His voice had changed, becoming heavier, not colder. "You raised doubts about the intelligence before the operation launched, and I was ordered to stand down." His jaw tightened. "We lost 6 of our people. It was actually 7, Maya corrected him. The 7th death was not officially tied to Coldwater, but the details line up. I also believe the same source that ruined Coldwater was responsible for the next 2 failed missions." Solis set the wrench back on the workbench. This time, he did not pick it back up. 19 lives. 19. A heavy silence hung in the space between them. Maya allowed it to continue. She had learned from painful experience that interrupting a silence like that is the worst thing you can do. "Who are you?" Solus asked at last, the question sounding more like a command. I was sent to prevent a 20th casualty, she replied, and I have to know, this very second, if you are going to help me, or if our conversation ends right here. Solus looked over at Remy. The dog returned his stare with a calm, deep patience that always amazed Maya. It was a perfect, focused stillness. What do you require from me? Solus asked. For just a moment, Maya felt something other than her usual control and focus. It was almost like relief, and she let herself feel it for a second, before pushing it aside. I required Diver's communication logs from the past 60 days, she told him. Not the official ones. I need the logs that are not supposed to be there. Solus blinked, genuinely startled. You are already onto Diver. I confirmed my suspicion this morning. He placed a call less than 30 seconds after I walked out of the supply room. His nervousness made him sloppy. Diver has worked this post for 3 years, Solus said, thinking aloud. He has access to every mission outline that comes through this office. I am aware. He is also Harmon's right-hand man here, Solus continued. Those two are practically inseparable. If you target Diver, Harmon will find out, and Harmon has a big mouth. I am aware of that as well, Maya said. Which is why Harmon believing I am just an incompetent analyst is the single most valuable advantage I have gained today. Solus just looked at her. The faintest trace of a grudging smile appeared on his face, and then vanished. You let him do that to you. I permitted it, she corrected. There is a distinction. In that instant, Solus made his choice. Maya could see the change in him. He had the expression of a man who had just accepted a terrible reality and was now adjusting his world to confront it. He straightened his posture slightly. He exhaled slowly. His hands became still. There is a person you should meet, he said. Sergeant Elena Marsh. She is our communications specialist. If anyone can retrieve those logs without tripping any alarms, it is her. Is she trustworthy? I would bet my life on her, Solus replied. I have, twice. Set it up, Maya ordered. For tonight. Somewhere, Diver never goes. She was already turning to leave when Solus called out. He just said, hey, but the word was heavy enough to make her pause. She waited. Those 19 soldiers, he said. I served with some of them. I know, Maya replied without turning back. That is part of the reason I sought you out. She returned to her station with Remy at her side, confident about one thing. She now had one ally, in a place where everyone viewed her as either an idiot or an obstacle. One was all it took to start. It was always all it took. What she did not know, and would not discover for another 3 hours, was that Diver had placed a second call. The person on the other end was not the contact she had been pursuing for 4 months. It was someone new, a name she did not recognize. A person who knew about Maya Cole, knew about her assignment, and was already lying in wait. Elena Marsh was small and sharp, a person who clearly knew how to use being underestimated to her advantage. She arrived at their meeting with a tablet, and her expression made it clear she had already figured out a few things. She glanced at Maya. She saw the fresh scrapes on her hands. She glanced at Remy. Then she sat down. Ray said you want Diver's off-the-books communication records, Marsh said, getting straight to the point. That is right, Maya confirmed. That is not going to be easy. I know that. If it was simple, it would already be done, Maya said. My point is, it is practically impossible to get them without triggering an immediate alert that Diver would notice. How long would you need to get them without any alerts? Marsh thought for a moment, her gaze drifting upward. 48 hours. Possibly a bit quicker if I can use the backup diagnostic tools, but I can only get into that system during the Thursday maintenance period. Thursday is in 31 hours, Maya pointed out. Yes, I am aware. What kind of trouble can Diver stir up in 31 hours? Marsh and Solus exchanged a look. It was the kind of look shared between two people who have already talked about a difficult subject and are deciding what to reveal. Tell her, Solus instructed. Marsh placed her tablet on the table. The display showed a mission summary. It was for a standard extraction, nothing secret, but the mission was set for 72 hours from now, and it involved a critical asset who had been hiding in a safe house for 3 weeks, waiting for this opportunity. Marsh spoke quietly, noting that the file had landed on Dever's desk 4 days earlier. Maya stared at the tablet. A familiar, dull pain began in her chest, and her palms started to burn again. The number 19 echoed in her head. "He has already reviewed it," Maya stated. "That is right, which means our contact is exposed." "Not necessarily," Marsh responded. "It means we have 72 hours to give Dever false information and use his own channel to identify his contact before he figures out our plan." The room went quiet. Remy leaned his body against Maya's leg. His steady presence was like an anchor, a solid reminder of the trust she had to maintain. Maya identified a critical problem with their plan. The deception would only succeed if Dever was completely convinced. For that to be possible, Maya stated, the news must come from a source he trusts implicitly. An uncomfortable quiet filled the space. She let one name linger in the air. Harmon. The tension in the room thickened immediately. Solace chose his words with caution, but Harmon is unaware of Dever's activities. Precisely, Maya agreed. And Dever is clueless that Harmon assaulted me this morning. She met their gazes. Harmon sees me as insignificant. Since Dever is monitoring me, he will also watch anyone close to me, particularly someone who treats me poorly. Maya allowed a moment for her words to settle. We need Harmon to act like his usual self. Arrogant, dismissive, and totally convinced that I am harmless. Marsh cocked her head slightly. So you plan to manipulate him completely? Harmon basically signed himself up for this, Maya stated plainly. Solace let out a brief, humorless laugh. He will not be happy to discover his role. He is not going to discover it, Maya countered. Not until our work is finished. Her voice was steady, revealing no anger. Yet they sensed something deeper. This was more than just a job. It was about settling a score, delivered coldly by a woman who never forgives and always gets even. The entire briefing concluded in only 12 minutes. Walking toward her quarters, Maya noticed the hallway air was thick with diesel exhaust, old coffee, and the particular desolation of a military post at night. With Remy beside her, her focus shifted to the unidentified contact. This was the person listed second in Dever's phone, someone aware of her arrival. A hidden adversary was active on this installation. For someone in Maya's profession, a hidden foe was the most lethal threat. She had until Thursday to identify them. Her discovery came at 2:47 in the morning. It was not located in Dever's secret documents, nor was it in the personnel files for the base, which she had already examined twice. The name appeared in no official files. She discovered it within the gaps in the information, a digital vacuum that only a master of concealment could craft. The name was Colonel Warren Phelps. Maya looked at the name for a long time. Remy dozed by her feet, his breaths even. She remained in the quiet, mentally replaying her knowledge of the man, attempting to make the pieces fit. Phelps had no assignment at Fort Cambria. He lacked any official connection here, with no visitor records or phone logs. His file was immaculate, the type of pristine that suggests a great deal of work. He was 56 years old and had served for 31 years, with a current post in logistics at the Pentagon. His official duties sounded exceptionally mundane, a clear indicator that it was a front. Next, she located a travel expense form, almost lost among financial records from a different division. It confirmed his presence within 40 miles of the base on 2 occasions in the past 8 months. Each of these trips occurred within 72 hours of a botched mission. Maya added his name beneath Dever's on her notepad. Gazing at the 2 names together, it all became clear. It was the sort of 3 a.m. realization that comes from just 4 hours of rest and sore ribs. This was not just one inside man. It was an entire intelligence ring. Dever was not simply a betrayer driven by greed, conviction, or a grudge. He was a single component, of a much larger operation. He served as a cog in a complicated mechanism, constructed over time by someone with the power and foresight to build it in secret. Someone very much like a colonel, with a boring job and an impeccable file. Her mind went to the 19 soldiers who had lost their lives. She recalled the anguish in Solace's voice as he mentioned some had been his friends. She imagined the operative in a secure location, with less than 69 hours until a rescue mission that was most likely already doomed. Then, her attention shifted back to Harmon. Harmon was still a useful asset, but the precise way to leverage him remained uncertain. She had to construct a narrative for him that would appeal to his vanity, his contacts, and his particular sense of self-importance, while keeping the reality hidden. Harmon's value came from his boastful and overconfident nature. Men like him are easy to control because the possibility of being used never enters their minds. She closed the file. Placing a hand on Remy, she felt the dog's even breaths. "All right," she murmured softly. "All right." The following morning, Harmon came up to her. She was in the mess hall, trying to eat some flavorless food, when he and a couple of his friends cornered her. He carried the casual assurance of a man who relishes these little power plays. "How are the hands?" he inquired, a slight grin on his lips. It was clear he did not expect a real reply. Maya looked up from her plate. She waited for just a single second. "They are much improved," she said. "I appreciate you asking, Sergeant." His confident smile faltered. Politeness was the last thing he anticipated. He expected silence or fear, but she was composed. Unconsciously, he was already changing his tactics. He sat in the chair across from her, without being asked. His companions stayed on their feet. "Did you report it?" he questioned. "Report what?" she responded. An odd expression crossed his face. It was not remorse. Harmon was incapable of remorse. It was the expression of someone weighing his options, an expression she recognized immediately. He was trying to determine if she posed a threat. "Regarding yesterday," he specified. "Oh, there was no need to report that," Maya replied brightly. "I just tripped. It was nothing serious." She raised her coffee cup. "Things are hectic here. No one has time for reports about a simple accident." Harmon observed her carefully. The hand holding the cup did not tremble, and her face revealed nothing. "Right," he repeated, dragging the word out. "Right." Then she inquired nonchalantly, "You and Lieutenant DeVere have been stationed here a while?" Her voice was airy, as if making conversation. His focus intensified. 3 years. What is your interest?" "Just trying to get a feel for the place." "He seems like a very capable officer," Maya remarked. "He is," Harmon affirmed. His tone carried genuine devotion, the profound respect soldiers feel for a leader they admire. "The finest intelligence officer I have ever known." "That is useful information," Maya said. She rose from her seat, picked up her tray, and gave a brief, businesslike nod to signal the end of the conversation. "Enjoy your day, Sergeant." She sensed his eyes on her as she walked away. Her gait was composed and unhurried. She kept her gaze forward. After dropping off her tray, she exited through a different doorway, her pace remaining constant. 30 seconds afterward, Remy found her in the hall, let go by Solace just as they had arranged. She bent down, holding the dog's face in her hands, and his soft licks helped to ease her pain, a minor comfort that felt enormous. "You are a very good boy," she murmured. "Good boy." She got to her feet. "Harmon presents an issue," she told Solace, who had joined her, "but in an unexpected way. He has a genuine admiration for DeVere. If our plan goes wrong and he discovers the reality, he will be devastated." Solace paused for a second. "Should we modify our approach?" "No," Maya replied. "However, it does alter my feelings on the matter." This was an unusual display of vulnerability from her. Solace seemed to grasp this and did not push the subject. He just continued walking with her wordlessly. Later that evening, at 11:17, the scheduled system maintenance began, and Elena Marsh started her work. Maya observed as Marsh navigated the system's inner workings. Elena operated with the quiet assurance of a virtual phantom, leaving behind no digital footprints. It was remarkable to witness her skill, a discipline that looked effortless, yet was profoundly intricate. "I am accessing the backup file," Marsh reported softly. "I will need 10 minutes." Maya gave her 9. "Success," Marsh declared. The screen showed 62 days of Dever's concealed communications. They had been encoded, rerouted, and erased many times, but the job was not flawless. The problem with sophisticated security is that it is built to block the curious, not to defeat the persistent. Yet, arrogance often leads people to overlook those who are patient. Marsh started to unravel the digital threads. While Maya observed and cross-referenced with her own information, a design began to take shape in her thoughts. It was not a geographical map, but a chronology of deceit, revealing the time it took for information to move from Dever's computer to a compromised agent. After 14 minutes, Marsh froze. "Maya," she breathed, her voice laced with urgency. Maya moved closer. The monitor displayed a communication from 12 days ago, sent through 3 different servers instead of Dever's usual computer. However, the electronic signature buried in the code had not been completely removed. It was a careless mistake, the type you make after years of feeling untouchable and relying too heavily on your methods. The digital trail pointed directly to the logistics department at the Pentagon, specifically to Colonel Warren Phelps's division. "He was aware I was coming," Maya stated. Her tone was devoid of emotion, a simple declaration of a terrible fact. "Phelps was aware of my arrival before I ever stepped onto this installation." Marsh spun around in her seat. "That means this whole operation was compromised from the start." "Which suggests," Solus interjected from the entrance, having slipped in silently, "that all your actions for the last 11 days, every conversation, every move, could now be known to Phelps." A profound silence filled the space, the type that occurs when a group of people understands a catastrophic truth simultaneously. Remy leaned his full weight against Maya's leg. For a lengthy moment, she stood without moving, her mind rapidly replaying the previous 11 days. It felt like a desperate search for a priceless treasure within a collapsing, burning structure. She reviewed each meeting, each conversation, and each action she had made. "No," she finally declared. The certainty in her voice made Solus and Marsh turn to her. "He does not have a complete picture. If Phelps had eyes on all my movements, Dever would not have been so shocked in the storage area. His reaction was genuine. He was totally ignorant of my presence. Therefore, Phelps knows my objective here, but he is unable to track me constantly." "So, how sure are you about this?" Solus asked. "Sure enough to make our move," Maya replied. It was not the absolute guarantee he wanted, and his face showed it, but it was the honest answer. In the dead of night, with a data log that had just destroyed her theories, honesty was all she had left. "The extraction is in 67 hours, Marsh cut in. "I am very aware of that," Maya said. "If we pass this fake intel through Harmon and Dever sends it to Phelps, he will know it is a setup," Marsh insisted. "A man like him can smell a trap." "He will miss this one," Maya countered, "if the trap confirms something he already thinks is true." "And what does he already think is true?" Marsh asked. Maya pictured the hallway, heard the grind of boots, the sound of men laughing, and saw the supreme confidence of someone who believed he had already won. "He thinks I am failing," she said. "He is certain I am chasing something I can never find, and that the pressure here has finally cracked me." She paused for a breath. "He thinks this because it is the story Dever has been feeding him for 11 straight days." "So you intend to play into that?" Solus asked, stating the obvious. "My intention is to become the person who proves every single one of his assumptions right." Maya laid out the plan. "I will be an analyst who is in way over her head, chasing the wrong suspect and acting on terrible information." She looked directly at each of them. "If Phelps believes I am chasing ghosts, he will not touch the extraction. He will just let it all play out. He will be convinced his own operation is perfectly safe. And our real mission moves forward on a different timeline, Marsh concluded, finally seeing her strategy. On a timeline Deaver knows nothing about, Maya confirmed, because the schedule I am giving Deaver is completely fake. The quiet that followed was different. It was the sound of a difficult problem finally finding its solution. Solus breathed out slowly. Everything hinges on Dever believing your act. It hinges on Dever seeing me as a nobody, Maya corrected, which brings us to Harmon. She looked at the healing cuts on her hands, where the new skin was stretched tight. Tomorrow, a trusted source will tell Harmon that I filed a formal complaint against him. It is the kind of complaint that gets lost in a review board for weeks. In that time, I will look exactly like the person he always thought I was, a woman who caved under pressure and ran to hide behind the rules. Marsh simply stared. He is going to be incredibly angry. I know, Maya said. He is going to make your time on this base a living nightmare. I am counting on that, she replied. And Dever will be watching the whole show. That is the point. Dever will report a compromised agent acting on emotion, creating chaos instead of doing her job. And he will send that report to Phelps. Phelps will believe every word because it supports everything he expected from the start. Solus rubbed a hand across his weary face. He looked exhausted, like a man shouldering a weight that was never meant for him. And while that show is going on, Maya said, her voice steady, I will trace every link in Dever's network straight to Phelps and build a case so perfect that neither man will ever see the outside of a prison cell again. She spoke with her usual calm, but her hands were shaking just enough that she had to press them to her legs to hide it. Remy sensed it. He always did. He pushed his body against hers, and his steady warmth calmed her. She took a deep breath and let it out for a count of 4, just as she was trained to do. She let the shaking come and then go. 67 hours remaining. 19 people to manage. One name she had learned only 14 hours ago. Her focus shifted to the asset in the safe house. She saw a person in a tiny, hidden room, waiting for a rescue team that was walking directly into a trap. You two should get some sleep, she said to Solus and Marsh. Tomorrow is going to be messy. She left with Remy, the hallway feeling tight around her. The base gave off its constant, low drone, and somewhere far away, Colonel Warren Phelps was sleeping well, certain he was untouchable. He was wrong about that. He was about to discover exactly how wrong. The complaint hit Harmon's inbox at 600 hours. Maya knew the instant he saw it. She was in the mess hall when he entered, and the entire feeling of the room changed, the way it does when a predator enters a small space. He did not look her way at first. That was the tell. An innocent person scans the room. A guilty one looks anywhere but at the source of his anger. It took him 11 seconds to spot her. Maya was quietly eating her breakfast. She did not look up. He crossed the room in 8 long strides. He slapped both of his hands on her table and leaned over her. His face was close enough for her to see the angry red rising up his neck. You filed a complaint. His voice was a tight, controlled whisper from a man trying his best not to yell. Maya put her fork down. She looked him in the eye with an expression she had not practiced, because she did not need to. She had pictured this exact moment since 2 o'clock that morning. It was the look of someone deeply mortified but trying to hide it, with just enough defiance to be real. I was just following procedure, she said. Following procedure, he repeated with disgust. We are on a secure base in the middle of a mission, and you filed an official grievance because you tripped in a hall. I did not trip, she answered. He scowled down at her. You are making a huge mistake, making me your enemy. I am not looking for enemies, Maya said. She let a hint of weakness enter her voice, just enough to sound like she was losing her confidence. I simply felt it needed to be documented. Harmon leaned back a little. He stood up to his full height and examined her like an object he no longer recognized. Do you have any clue what you just did? He demanded. This puts a negative mark on my file until a panel can review it. That might be 4 to 6 weeks. For over a month, my time will be tied up with this instead of my real duties. I am sorry if the timing is not good for you, Maya said. It was the single most infuriating thing she could have said. She knew it perfectly well. She said it because she needed it to sound like a completely tone-deaf and selfish remark from someone who cared more for her feelings than the mission. His jaw clenched. He took his hands off the table. "We are done here," he said, then turned sharply and walked out. At a table nearby, one of his team members who saw it all happen took out his phone. From the corner of her eye, Maya watched him type a message and gave herself 4 seconds of dark satisfaction before she started eating again. By noon, the rumor had spread all over Fort Cambria. DeVere had heard 3 different versions by 2 in the afternoon. Maya knew this was true because Marsh sent her a text with a single word, running. It confirmed DeVere was passing the story up the ladder. It meant that somewhere in Washington, Colonel Warren Phelps was hearing about an analyst who had lost her cool, started a fight, and was more focused on drama than her work. Maya was in her quarters when Solis came to her door. "The plan is working," he said as she opened it. "I know." Marsh picked up 2 more outbound signals from DeVere in the last hour. She could not read the messages, but the timing and pattern were an exact match to his behavior before cold water. He stopped. He is sending intel. He thinks he is in the clear now, so he is passing information. "Good," Maya said. "Let him. I need Phelps to feel totally secure." Solis came in and sat down. Remy's tail gave 1 thump before he returned to his post by the door. "I need to ask you about something," Solis said. "It is about the fake rescue schedule you gave DeVere. If Phelps makes a move before we can stop him, our asset is stuck in that safe house," Solis went on. "I know that. We have 61 hours. I am aware of how much time we have, Maya." He leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. His look was plain and direct, the expression of a man who was finished with games. "If this goes wrong, that asset is never getting out. Do you hear me? Our case has to be absolutely perfect before time runs out." "It will be," she promised. "How sure are you?" She looked at him, seeing the deep lines on his face and the silver in his hair. She knew he had a purple heart he kept hidden away, a medal he would not wear because his own self-worth was the only award he ever required. She pictured the 6 team members she lost during the cold water mission. "My answer is final," she stated. "I am not backing down." Solis sighed deeply. "That plan sounds riskier each time I hear it." "Good," she answered. "It means you're listening, which is why I trust you." His features relaxed for a second. He nodded once and stood up. "Marsh needs another 2 hours to map everything," he said. "Then we'll have a view of the entire network." "She has 90 minutes, Maya ordered. "Tell her to avoid the backup channel again tonight. Phelps will see 2 anomalies as a clear pattern." Solis stopped at the door. "She already thought of that." "I was sure she did," Maya replied. "I just had to say it out loud." When he was gone, Maya stayed in her chair with Remy. She was not planning, resting, or reviewing files. She just sat in the stillness. This quiet was also part of the job. It was the calm between actions, a moment to steady yourself and wait. Her mind turned to the asset. Right now, it was a code name, a risk profile, and some blurry photos. But a real person had been waiting for 3 weeks, trusting that the system would bring them home. However, that system was compromised long before Maya took this assignment. The person in that house had no idea of the danger they were in. She pushed her hands onto her thighs, feeling the sting of her wounds as they healed. The pain felt good, a reminder of something real. Physical pain, at least, was always truthful. At 4:17 in the afternoon, everything changed. Marsh sent a message with only 2 words. "Come now." Maya made it to the comms room in less than 4 minutes. Solis was there. Marsh stood motionless, her face a mask of shock, as if trying to process a terrible blow. "What is it?" Maya demanded. "The network map is finished." Marsh started talking. I tracked the full data trail from Dever through 3 relays straight to Phelps. The proof is undeniable. We have timestamps, authentications, and parts of messages that will bury him. She stopped for a beat. That is the good news. And the bad news? Maya prompted. Marsh turned her tablet towards them. A message was on the screen, one that was not in Dever's outbound mail. It came in 3 hours ago. The signal passed through 2 firewalls and hit a cell tower just 42 miles from Fort Cambria. Phelps was not in the capital. He was a mere 42 miles from their location. Silence fell on the room once more. Maya was becoming familiar with this specific quiet, the strange connection of 3 minds reaching the same terrible conclusion together. "He is here," Solus breathed, his voice almost silent. "He was already nearby," Maya said, her voice steady, even as a chill went through her. "He was around before Dever's message, before our argument, before anything today." She looked at the screen. "He did not come because of us. He was already en route." "But why?" Marsh wondered. It took Maya just 4 seconds to connect the dots. "He realized my behavior did not fit Dever's profile of me. Dever painted me as a fool, but Phelps must have doubted it. He is here to see for himself." "He came to observe you," Solus said flatly. "He is watching all of us," Maya corrected. She recalled Solus standing at her doorway last night. Had someone else seen them talk? She retraced her steps in her mind, thinking of every door she used, every talk she had near a window. "How much does he know?" Marsh asked. "Not the whole story, or we would be finished," Maya answered. "But he knows enough to ruin our entire operation." She moved away from the tablet. She faced away from them for a second, gathering her thoughts. The decoy extraction was already underway. Dever had passed on the false details. Phelps knew the plan, but being just 42 miles away showed he was nervous. It meant he did not completely trust the story Dever was feeding him. His suspicion gave Maya a small opening. "We are advancing the timeline," she declared. Solus let out a slight protest. "We do not have that authority. High Command makes that call, and they are not here." "So we call someone who is not on this base," Maya said, facing them again. "Get me a secure line. It has to be off the base grid, something Dever has not touched in the last 3 years." "That does not leave us with much," Marsh noted. "What are our options?" Marsh thought for a moment. "Just my personal satellite phone. I set it up on a private server 3 years ago, for a situation just like this. It has never touched the base network." Maya just looked at her. "You prepared for this?" "I prepared for a day like this," Marsh said quietly. "After the cold water incident, I stopped trusting the official channels and built my own safety net." She hesitated. "I really hoped I would never need it." "We need it now," Maya stated. Her call took 8 minutes and 22 seconds. She talked to a single person, someone whose name was forbidden on this base. The person on the other end heard her whole report without a word, asked just 3 questions, and then spoke with complete authority. "Give me 2 hours. Just 2 hours." The official mission timeline still showed 58 hours remaining. Maya gave the phone to Marsh and turned to Solus. "The public schedule is unchanged. Phelps must think the original extraction is happening. No matter why he is here, he cannot know we are on to him." "How do we manage that?" Solus asked. "Being this close, he must have eyes on us. Phelps would not come 40 miles without an observation post." "You are right," Maya said. "He definitely would have surveillance." She mentally scanned the base map, the access points, and anyone who could be an unintentional leak. Contractors, vendors, and a dozen or so civilians with lower security clearance. "So, our job is to make today look perfectly routine," Maya commanded. "Harmon can keep being mad at me, which should be no problem for him. Dever can send his reports, believing he has succeeded, and I will continue to act like the most incompetent analyst at Fort Cambria." Solus almost smiled. "And how do you plan to put on that show?" Maya thought about what she had to do next. Her task for the evening was simple: go to the mess hall. She would find a table alone. She had to appear completely defeated. This was the heart of her strategy. Maya understood a spy's biggest weakness. They see what they want to see. Phelps believed she was incompetent. If he saw her looking alone and broken, it would just prove him right. He would dismiss her and stop paying attention. So, she went to the dining hall and chose a small table for one. When Harmon came in with his crew, one of them said something loud enough for her to hear. She ignored it, staring at her food. She kept her posture tense, just enough to be seen. Beneath the table, Remy laid his head on her boot. She thought about the person waiting in the safe house. She wondered about the logistics of a rescue in just 2 hours, one that had to be invisible to the enemy. She imagined Warren Phelps, 42 miles from here, looking over her file and wondering if she was faking her failure. She prayed silently. Please fall for it. Let this act be good enough. At 7:43 in the evening, a text came from Marsh. It was only 3 words. We have authorization. Maya read the message under the table, angling the phone out of sight. Her thumb rested on the screen as she exhaled slowly. The actual rescue had begun, using a timeline DeVere was blind to and Phelps would never see coming. The new operation was simple. The team was ready, and the schedule was firm. All the details were locked down. The asset would be secure long before Phelps knew he had been fed lies. That was the main goal. But it was only the first half of Maya's true mission. The second half was Warren Phelps. She wanted his whole organization and the proof of a corrupt system that had already cost 19 lives. If she let it stand, more would die. She had the evidence. She had DeVere's communications, complete with timestamps and digital signatures that would hold up in court. The only thing she lacked was a way to draw Phelps out from 42 miles away without setting off all his alarms. After tucking her phone away, she lifted her fork. The food was like ash in her mouth, but she swallowed it anyway. Beneath the table, her dog Remy pressed his head to her foot. His silent, steady presence gave her the strength she desperately needed. The clock was ticking. She had only 37 hours to deal with Warren Phelps. Her strategy was already set. She would leverage the one person here who despised her, turning his hatred into a tool. He was devoted to DeVere, completely blind to the monster his boss really was. Her plan was to give Victor Harmon the truth, or a carefully constructed piece of it. She knew he would resist listening at the start. He would only accept what was impossible to deny. At 9 in the evening, she located Harmon in the deserted vehicle bay. The location was deliberate, and it was not just for seclusion. This was the precise place her ordeal started, where she was knocked down, clutching a leash as laughter echoed around her. The memory was burned into her mind. He had to be on this very spot to learn what was real. She was counting on the setting to have an impact. His head snapped up as she walked in. His expression hardened into its usual cold contempt for her. I have 0 to say to you, he bit out. That is okay, Maya replied. I am not here for conversation. I am here to provide you with intelligence. Your actions afterward are entirely up to you. I want nothing from you. She ignored his protest and went on. Frank DeVere has been feeding classified intel to hostiles for at least 8 months. His betrayal led to the deaths of 19 American soldiers during 3 distinct missions. My evidence is ironclad. I have every communication, every coordinate, every timestamp. Right now, his handler is 42 miles away, waiting for confirmation that his source is safe. A heavy silence filled the cavernous garage. Harmon remained frozen, completely speechless. He clutched a wrench, his face twisting from shock into a raw, dangerous fury. That cannot be true, he breathed. His tone had completely changed. The anger vanished, leaving a brittle, icy emptiness. He spoke like someone watching his entire life fall to pieces. I understand why you need it to be a lie, Maya said gently, but I also believe you are smart enough to recognize the truth, no matter how painful. Frank DeVere is my friend, Harmon stated. The word felt empty, like a promise he could no longer keep. I know, Maya replied, her tone full of genuine compassion, not tricks. She recognized the terrible weight she was placing on his shoulders. I truly know he is. Harmon set the tool down on the workbench. His movements were deliberate and restrained, as if fighting the urge to smash something. Show it to me, he ordered. And so, she did. She carried no physical documents, nothing that could be physically confiscated. She handed him an encrypted tablet and waited as he examined the data. Observing his expression, she considered the profound cost of treachery. For 6 silent minutes he scrolled through the evidence. 4 minutes in, his breathing grew ragged. A minute later, his free hand tightened into a white-knuckled fist. When the 6 minutes were up, he returned the device. Danny, he uttered. That was the name Maya was expecting to hear. She knew it was inevitable. She had been aware of it for 3 days, ever since finding the name in the documents. Danny was the captive in the mission brief that Dever accessed 4 days before her arrival. Your brother has been held captive for 3 weeks, she stated. The initial extraction was a setup from the beginning. Dever knew everything about it. Harmon let out a noise that Maya could never put into words, a sound that would haunt her. It was not a word, but the raw sound of a mind fracturing under an impossible weight. Is my brother alive? He demanded. Yes, Maya confirmed. His recovery mission was accelerated 6 hours ago. It is now on a new timeline Dever knows nothing about. We will get your brother back. But first, I must reach Warren Phelps before he figures out he is exposed and disappears. Harmon looked at her then, truly perceiving her for the first time since her arrival. His gaze was different. He no longer saw an analyst, a victim, or a punchline. With his own narrative shattered, he was finally able to see the real her. What is my part in this? He asked. Dever has complete faith in you, Maya explained. You will tell him you dug into my background, found something compromising, and believe leadership needs to know before I create a bigger problem. Harmon clenched his jaw. So you want me to turn you into him? I need you to give him a reason to call Phelps, Maya clarified. Something that will convince Phelps the game is already over in his favor. Men like him become reckless when they think they have won. He will come out of hiding to oversee the final moves himself. And upon his arrival, Harmon said, realization dawning, you will be there to meet him. When he arrives, Maya corrected, all of us will be there for him. The subsequent silence was unlike any that had come before. It was the sound of a man crossing from one world into a new one. It was profound, expensive, and absolutely necessary. If any piece of this is a mistake, Harmon said softly. There are no mistakes, Maya answered. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he lifted the wrench from the workbench. He rotated it in his grip before placing it back down. Walk me through my lines, word for word. At 10:30 that evening, Dever accepted Harmon's report. He called Phelps at 10:41. Marsh was tracking the entire conversation. Maya waited in the corridor outside Dever's room, Remy silent at her side. She could hear the faint sound of the network traffic. At 10:49, a one-word message came from Marsh. Moving. Phelps was en route. The mobile signal began to shift, almost imperceptibly at first. Then it moved with the steady pace of a person who has no doubt they are in command. The distance dropped from 42 miles to 38, then to 29. He was approaching the base, unhurried, with the assurance of a director arriving for a show he already controlled. Maya's window was down to just 19 minutes. Solace, she whispered into her comms unit. Standing by, came the reply from the east perimeter. Marsh, do you have a live recording? Marsh replied, Protocols are engaged. We are capturing every word he says. Harmon. After a brief silence, he responded, Ready. His tone was devoid of emotion, burdened by the terrible cost of his duty. Phelps's vehicle drove through the civilian gate at 11:12 p.m. His credentials passed inspection seamlessly, precisely as they had predicted. Someone with his level of authority makes sure doors always open for him. Harmon was positioned in the primary hall to greet him. Through a concealed mic, Maya listened to the whole conversation. She caught Harmon's greeting, followed by the sound of Phelps's voice effortlessly commanding and authoritative. "Present the situation," Phelps ordered. "Our problem is the analyst," Harmon answered. His tone was steady, and it took Maya by surprise. "She has gone rogue ever since getting here," Harmon stated. "I believe her first intelligence summary was a complete fiction." "And her source was?" Phelps inquired. "That is the detail I need from you, sir," Harmon replied. "You see the entire board. I only see my one square." That was the hook. The trap was perfect, and Phelps, consumed by hubris, took it without hesitation. "The main objective is secure," Phelps stated. "Cole is not a threat. She has spent 11 days on a wild goose chase, and her extraction timeline is off by 18 hours. By the time they move on her intel, the window will be long gone." He talked with the easy assurance one reserves for a close confidant. His statements were so precise, so loaded with classified details, they amounted to a confession. He revealed knowledge he had no business, possessing intel from a single, compromised source. That was the trigger. Maya moved immediately. She entered the corridor, flanked by Remy and Solace. 3 more operators, cleared just last night, fell in behind them. They had been on site for 6 hours in civilian attire, completely unnoticed because no one knew to look. Phelps pivoted sharply on his heel. His expression was composed, intelligent, and accustomed to command. However, the moment his eyes met Maya's, a shift occurred. It was not alarm. It was recognition. He had no idea who she was, but he understood the scenario perfectly. The tactical formation of her team told him his play had ended. "Colonel Warren Phelps," Maya stated. Her voice was as unshakable as it had been all week. "You are being placed under arrest. A court-martial awaits you for conspiracy, conduct unbecoming, and for your part in the deaths of 19 American service members." Phelps just stared back at her. His gaze swept over her team before landing on Harmon. Harmon met his stare, his own face completely unreadable. "Victor," Phelps pleaded. A desperate, final appeal using his first name. "Do not," Harmon responded, his tone soft but unbreakable. Phelps said nothing more. He was wise enough to keep quiet. He stood there as his credentials were taken and his wrists were cuffed. A hidden recorder caught every sound as his face lost all feeling, the look of a man watching his 30-year kingdom crumble in a corridor at 11 on a Tuesday night. DeVere was apprehended in his room just 4 minutes later. Maya listened from the hall, Remy nudging his head into her hand. She hugged him close, feeling the sharp sting of her own recent cuts, a physical pain that was entirely her own. Solace came and stood beside her. For a while, they both stood in the kind of quiet that falls after a mission is over. "Danny Harmon's plane gets in 41 hours from now," Maya finally said. Solace let out a long breath. "Is Harmon aware?" "He will be in about 3 minutes," Maya answered, "as soon as I tell him." She went to the reception area to look for Harmon. He was against a wall with his arms crossed, his face showing a clear internal struggle. As she came into view, he looked up. He wore the stunned look of a person struggling to grasp incredible news. "DeVere?" he asked. "He has been detained," Maya confirmed. "It is all over." He gave a slow, difficult nod that seemed to require all of his strength. Harmon's voice was heavy with feeling. "We knew each other for 11 years. "I know," Maya said gently. "I cannot begin to understand how to process this. You do not have to make sense of it tonight," she advised him. He looked at her, and the hardness in his face began to fade. It was not an apology, but for her, it was nearly the same. "He observed your hands. They are getting better," she responded. Then she broke the news about Danny. She watched his entire world crumble in a moment. For just a second, his eyes welled up with tears that he quickly suppressed. He choked for a moment, then his breathing evened out. He brought the back of his hand to his lips. 41 hours, he murmured. 41 hours, Maya confirmed. He gave one last nod and faced the wall. She let him have the moment, understanding that some grief needs to be private. Remy approached and softly pushed his nose against Harmon's hand. The big man looked down at the animal. His composure held firm, but a flicker of real emotion showed through the cracks. He placed a hand on Remy's head. Remy remained by his side, offering quiet companionship. By 4 a.m, the tribunal was in possession of the full evidence package. The package held files detailing the whole network, records of conversations, digital authentications, and the recording of Phelps's own admission of guilt. The case was airtight, constructed in just 11 days by the one person on base nobody saw as a danger. The extraction was officially successful at 2 p.m. the next day. The target was retrieved unharmed through a route Devere knew nothing about. The team's directives were never routed through a system Phelps could access. It was a perfect mission, the kind that unfolds when a mole has finally been found. This is the result when intelligence is protected and skilled individuals are allowed to work without hindrance. Maya was not there for the extraction. She was occupied with a 9-hour debrief, recounting every single move, detail, and item of proof from her arrival at Fort Cambria. She answered all questions with her signature composure and remarkable accuracy. She omitted no detail, from the gravel parking area and the heavy footwear, to the sounds of ridicule, to the 11 seconds a man decided to overlook an injustice he refused to see. When the debriefing ended, she went outdoors into the cool air with Remy at her side. She stopped, lifted her head toward the sky, and inhaled deeply, savoring the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. 19 names. They were still with her, but they were no longer a heavy burden. Instead, they were her motivation, the entire reason she came to this base 11 days prior, withstood the humiliation on the gravel, and waited for the right time to act. Success is not always a noisy or dramatic affair. At times, victory is silent and requires patience. It is about being ready to be ignored, remembering who misjudged you, and having complete faith that your time will come. This was a truth Maya Cole had understood for her whole life. She was simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch on. If this tale connected with you, if it served as a reminder that real power can be quiet and bravery does not have to be loud, I invite you to subscribe. Please, put the name of your town in the comments below, so I can track how widely this message has spread. And if you agree that the one who is most overlooked is often the strongest, please write Amen. I wish you well, wherever in the world you may be.